One of my good friends loaned me her car when I had to have some work done on my car, and she just bought a new iPad and didn't have a cover for it. And I thought, I'm going to make her a beautiful cover for her iPad. And here it is. I can't wait to give it to her. So I'm going to show you how I made that. I had this beautiful fabric and of course my favorite supply, fast to fuse. I use the heavyweight fast to fuse. Now before I start doing any cutting, I always make a pattern. I never wing it. Now I'm just using regular printer paper that's 8.5 by 11. I know that her iPad was around 7 inches by 10 inches. And so, of course, I wanted to make it a little bit bigger than that. So I did trim a little bit off, but it's about 8.5 by 11. It's a little smaller than that. And I really do all of my trial and error on the pattern here. So usually I use poster board. I didn't have any, and I'm just using the regular printer paper. So I'm trying to figure out how to put the pockets. I couldn't quite figure out how I wanted to do the pockets, and I knew I wanted a flap on it that had Velcro on it to close it up. So I wasn't sure how big I wanted that. So all of that I try out on my little pattern here. Of course, I'd much rather make all my mistakes on this little flimsy pattern than on my sewing. So I'm trying different ways just to get an idea of how I want the pockets to be. I wasn't sure where I wanted the opening of the pockets to be. I knew I was putting two pockets, one for the iPad, and then I wanted to have another pocket for papers or whatever she might want to put in there. And so I think I'm ready to cut out my pieces. So here's a beautiful fabric I'm going to use, and the fast to fuse. This piece is going to be for the pockets. I measured that and I cut the right size for 2 pockets here. And I'm going to iron that first with a dry iron set on high and then with a steam iron, and that's how that fuses together. So that's the pockets, and this larger piece is going to be that main longer piece. And again, this one I'm going to do the same thing. The fast to fuse goes in between the 2 pieces of fabric, and it makes what we refer to as the fabric sandwich. Now I always seem to have a corner that doesn't fuse, and I end up ironing again. And here are my sandwiches, and as you can see, this little corner here didn't fuse, but it's not really a big deal because I can just re-iron it and it will probably stick together. Once that is fused, I'm going to cut the shapes out. So these are the pockets, and I just keep them together so I know that these are the pockets, and this is that longer piece, and I keep that together so that when I sew it together the print matches exactly. And I zigzagged the tops of the pockets, the parts that won't get sewn onto the backing, and I'm going to zigzag those pieces together, and here they are zigzagged together. And then I'm going to need a piece of Velcro also for the flap to close up the flap, and see how nicely these bend when you zigzag those together. I sewed the Velcro onto the flap edge already, but I noticed that when I folded this together that I didn't really feel it had enough of a spine, so to speak. So I'm going to add a little spine so that it can have more thickness, so that it closes easier when the iPad's in there. So I drew a line about 1/4 of an inch away from that last fold, and then I cut there, and then I'm going to zigzag that together. And there it is, and that just allows for more thickness. While I was at it, I zigzagged around the entire outer edge of this shape to finish off those edges. Now I need to mark where the other Velcro is going, and I do that by just putting the ruler right just slightly under the edge of that flap because the other Velcro is there, and drawing a line, and then sewing that Velcro onto that piece. And now I can sew my pockets on. You can't sew those pockets on until you get that Velcro on there. Don't ask me how I know that. So I finally decided how I'm going to do the pockets. I'm actually going to make both pockets open at the top. How can I explain it? Well, you'll see in a minute how I did it. I didn't do it exactly the way I did my pattern because once I sewed it all together, it made more sense to have the openings where I put them. So here it is. Check this out. Is this awesome? I can't wait to give this to her. There's the iPad, and here is my little pocket that she can put papers in, and my beautiful closure. And what a great gift, don't you think?